The diner was silent the moment Maria whispered, "Sir, my mother had that same tattoo." The man's hand froze midair, his coffee trembling as his world began to shake. His sharp eyes, confident seconds ago, now held something raw. Fear, maybe recognition. The lights flickered slightly, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Behind the counter, the radio crackled a love song from the 90s, one her mother used to hum when she missed someone. Maria's pulse raced. She didn't know if she was speaking to a stranger or her past. That compass inked on his wrist. It wasn't just a tattoo. It was a door to everything she'd been too afraid to ask. The man cleared his throat, forcing composure into his voice, but the tremor betrayed him. "You must be mistaken," he said, his accent refined, his tone defensive. Maria stepped closer, her tray shaking, coffee spilling slightly on the counter. She could see it clearly now. 3 faded initials beneath the compass, EML, her mother's initials. Her world began to blur, the smell of burnt toast mixing with the storm of disbelief. "My mom had that same mark," she murmured, half to herself, half to the ghost before her. He looked away, eyes darting toward the door, ready to flee from fate once again. Outside, the sun had just begun to rise, spilling gold over the rain-damped streets. Inside, Maria's thoughts screamed louder than the traffic horns. Why here? Why now? Why him? Her mother had told her countless stories of a man who promised forever, then vanished without goodbye. She used to dream of finding him, sometimes to hug him, sometimes to demand why he left. And now he was here, ordering black coffee like nothing ever happened. Maria's fingers trembled as she set down the cup again, desperate to steady her breathing, desperate to know the truth. He adjusted his cuff, hiding the tattoo again, as if bearing a secret could erase it. But Maria couldn't unsee it. It was carved into her memory now, burning through every word her mother had ever whispered in the dark. "You remind me of someone," he said finally, a strange softness cracking through his voice. She met his gaze, and for a fleeting second, she saw something, sadness, regret, maybe even recognition. "Maybe you knew her," she replied quietly. "Elena Morales." The name fell like thunder between them, and his grip on the coffee cup shattered. The sound of porcelain breaking echoed through the diner, turning every head. But Maria didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on his trembling hands. He was no longer the untouchable man in the tailored suit. He was human, fragile, drowning in ghosts. "You need to leave," he muttered, his voice low, pleading. But Maria shook her head. "Not until you tell me why you left her." Outside, the wind howled against the glass, as if the storm had finally found its way in. And with it came the truth she'd been waiting her whole life to face. Richard's car engine roared as he left the diner. But Maria stood frozen by the counter, her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. The smell of burnt coffee mixed with her mother's perfume in her mind, sweet, floral, and full of memories that now burned like fire. She wiped a tear quickly, afraid someone might notice, but everyone had already gone back to their lives, unaware that hers had just changed forever. Her hand still shook, and she could almost hear her mother's voice. "If you ever find him, Mija, ask him why." The question now echoed louder than the rain outside. Who was this man to her? A stranger, a ghost, or the truth she was never supposed to uncover? That night, sleep refused to come. Maria sat on her small bed, surrounded by unpaid bills, diner receipts, an old box she'd sworn never to open. It was her mother's memory box, the one she kept locked since Elena's funeral 5 years ago. With trembling hands, Maria opened it for the first time. Inside, she found faded letters tied with a red ribbon, yellowed photos, and a compass pen identical to the tattoo she'd seen on Richard's wrist. Her throat tightened as she traced the initials engraved on the back. R.C. The air left her lungs. It couldn't be a coincidence. The man in the diner wasn't just anyone. Lightning flashed through the cracked window, illuminating the photograph tucked beneath the letters. Her mother stood on a beach, barefoot, her arm wrapped around a man whose face was torn from the picture. But his arm, his tattoo, was there, clear as day. Maria clutched it close, tears falling onto the faded paper. She flipped the photo and read the message on the back. "To my compass, my home, Richard Collins." The name hit her like a thunderclap. He hadn't changed his name, hadn't hidden. He'd just disappeared. Her mother wasn't abandoned by accident. There was something more. At dawn, Maria walked through the city streets, the cold wind biting her cheeks as she rehearsed what she would say. She looked up Richard Collins on her phone. Real estate mogul, millionaire, philanthropist. The perfect life built on someone else's broken heart. But beneath the headlines and luxury homes, she saw the same eyes that looked at her across that diner counter. Haunted and lonely. She promised herself she'd confront him. Not out of anger, but to free herself from the lies that chained her family. Her mother deserved answers, and so did she. By the time she reached his real estate office, her knees were trembling. Glass walls, leather chairs, and walls lined with awards. It was everything her mother never had. Behind a polished desk sat Richard, typing an email, pretending to be fine. When he looked up, their eyes met again, and both knew the truth could no longer hide behind polite words or coffee cups. Maria's voice broke the silence. "You owe me the truth, Mr. Collins." He leaned back, exhaling heavily, the weight of decades sinking into his shoulders. "You look just like her," he said quietly. And for the first time, Maria didn't know whether to cry or scream. The silence between them was heavy, thick with all the years that had been lost. Maria's breath trembled as she stepped closer, her mother's photo clutched tightly in her hand. Richard's polished office suddenly felt like a cage, its glossy surfaces reflecting everything fake about his perfect life. "You left her," Maria said, voice breaking, "and you left me before I even had a chance to know who you were." His lips parted, but no words came, only a soft sigh, like the sound of regret escaping to the cracks of time. For a man who had sold thousands of homes, he suddenly looked homeless, lost in memories he'd buried deep. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I never stopped looking for her." Maria's chest tightened, disbelief battling the fragile hope rising inside her. "Looking for her? You built an empire while she raised me working double shifts at the diner." She shot back. Her anger trembled with grief. She wasn't looking for revenge. She wanted to understand. Richard stood, his eyes glistening. "I thought she left me, Maria. I came back for her, but she was gone, her phone disconnected, her apartment empty." He reached into a drawer and pulled out an old, weathered envelope. Inside was a letter, folded and unfolded so many times it was nearly falling apart. "I kept this," he said softly, "every day, to remind myself of what I lost." He placed a letter on the desk, his fingers trembling. Maria hesitated before picking it up, afraid of what truths might live inside. The paper smelled faintly of perfume and dust, and the handwriting, delicate, looping, was unmistakably her mother's. "If you ever find this, Richard," it read, "know that I loved you, but I had to protect our child." Maria's throat closed, the words blurring through tears. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Protect me from what?" He turned away, his jaw tightening, as if the answer itself could destroy them both. "From my past," he said, his tone dark and broken. "From people who wanted me gone." Her mind raced. What could her mother have possibly been protecting her from? She searched his face for lies, but saw only pain etched into every line. "You were in danger?" she asked, and he nodded slowly. "Years ago, I was caught in a deal that went wrong. Powerful men, dangerous ones. I thought keeping distance would keep her safe." Maria clenched her fists, anger and sorrow colliding inside her. "You don't get to call abandonment protection," she said sharply. "You left her alone with the weight of your choices." Richard didn't argue. He just whispered, and it's haunted me every day since. Maria turned to leave, her heart splintering under the weight of half-truths and missed years. But as she reached the door, Richard said something that stopped her cold. "She sent me a letter a year before she died," he said, voice breaking. "She told me about you, that you were kind, strong, and that I'd know you when I saw you." Maria froze, tears spilling freely now. She turned slowly, her voice trembling. "Then why didn't you come?" He looked up, his eyes red, his voice cracked into a whisper. "Because I thought I didn't deserve to." Maria stood by the door, her reflection trembling in the glass, caught between rage and heartbreak. The words, "I didn't deserve to," echoed inside her like a cruel lullaby, repeating the story of every broken promise her mother had ever buried in silence. She turned around slowly, her voice shaking but steady. "You had 23 years to try, Richard. 23 birthdays. 23 nights I watched her cry and whisper your name." He looked down, shoulders heavy, as if every number struck him like a hammer. "I know," he whispered, "and there isn't a single day I don't regret it." His confession filled the air, but Maria's heart couldn't absorb forgiveness yet. Not when so much of her life had been shaped by his absence. Richard walked toward the window, the city skyline gleaming behind him. A view built on success, but rooted in guilt. "I sold homes to families while I had none of my own," he said, his voice hollow. "Every smiling couple reminded me of what I lost. But when I saw you at that diner," he turned to her, eyes glassy, "it was like seeing her again." Maria's breath caught, her mother's memory flashing like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You can't just show up now and fix it," she said softly, tears threatening. "She's gone." Richard nodded, his voice cracking. "But you're not." The silence that followed felt like the calm after a storm, heavy but clean. Maria looked at the letter again, her mother's delicate handwriting glowing under the light. "Know that I loved you," it read, "but I had to protect our child." She could almost hear Elena's voice, warm and tired, whispering those words at bedtime. "She forgave you," Maria said quietly, "even when she shouldn't have." Richard's lips trembled. "I don't deserve her forgiveness," he murmured, "but I'll spend the rest of my life earning yours." The sincerity in his eyes disarmed her anger, but she wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Some wounds needed air before they could heal. Maria sat down, exhausted, her body trembling with too many emotions to name. "Tell me everything," she said finally, her tone no longer harsh but heavy with longing. Richard sat across from her, his voice low. "We met when I was broke, selling cheap apartments out of a car trunk. She believed in me before anyone else did." He smiled faintly, remembering. "We used to sit by the river, dreaming of a house we'd build one day. For us, for you?" The tattoo, the compass was her idea. She said I was her direction. Maria bit her lip, fighting the ache in her chest. "And when she got pregnant?" she asked. "That's when everything went wrong," he said, eyes darkening with regret. He told her about the deal, the one that made him rich but cursed his conscience. "I made money for men who didn't play fair," he said quietly. "When I tried to walk away, they threatened her. I left to keep her safe, but in saving her, I destroyed her." Maria pressed her hand to her mouth, the truth cutting sharper than she expected. All those nights her mother cried weren't out of hatred, but fear. Fear for him, for her. She closed her eyes, whispering, "She died thinking you forgot her." Richard's tears finally broke, and I lived knowing I couldn't find her. Their pain met in the silence. Two broken souls finally standing in the same truth. The air in the office felt heavier now, not from anger, but from the weight of all the words left unsaid for decades. Maria leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, all this time, you were protecting us from people who no longer exist." Richard nodded slowly, shame flickering across his face. "By the time I realized that, it was too late. You'd grown up and she was gone." He rubbed his hands together, his composure cracking, the businessman fading into a broken man who'd built his empire on regret. "Every time I passed by that diner, I thought of her," he admitted, "but I couldn't go in. I didn't know how to face what I'd done." Maria's eyes softened, though her heart still burned. "You should have tried," she whispered. The city outside roared with life. Cars honking, people shouting, a cruel reminder that the world keeps moving, even when your heart stands still. Richard walked toward a cabinet and opened it, pulling out a small velvet box covered in dust. He set it gently in front of her. "She gave me this the night before I left," he said. Maria hesitated before opening it. Inside was a delicate gold chain with a tiny compass pendant, identical to the one her mother used to wear. "She said it would bring me back home one day," he continued, voice trembling. Maria traced the compass with her finger, her eyes filling with tears. "It did," she said quietly. "It just took you 23 years." Richard smiled faintly, his lips quivering as he exhaled a shaky breath. "You sound like her," he said. "Every word, every look." Maria shook her head, her voice tight. "No, I'm not her. I'm the part of her that kept waiting." He nodded, accepting the truth he couldn't argue with. "Then maybe I came back to finish what I started," he said softly. "To give you the life I promised her." Maria looked up sharply. "You think money can fix this?" Richard's expression turned solemn. "No, I think love can." His tone wasn't arrogant. It was desperate, honest, raw. For the first time, Maria saw a man not trying to justify himself, but begging for a second chance to be human. He opened his wallet and pulled out a worn photo, a younger Elena, laughing under a tree, sunlight catching her hair. "This was the last picture I ever took of her," he said, voice shaking. "I carried it everywhere, through every deal, every empty mansion." Maria stared at the photo, her throat tightening as she whispered, "She never forgot you." The realization hurt more than she expected, that all her mother's pain had been tied to love, not hate. Richard nodded, tears running down his face now. "I never stopped loving her, but I didn't know how to come back without breaking you both again." Maria's voice softened. "You already did." The walls seemed to close in around them, two souls surrounded by everything success couldn't buy. Richard looked at her with eyes full of guilt and longing. "Maria," he said gently, "let me make things right, not with words, with actions." She crossed her arms, holding herself together. "What kind of actions?" He took a deep breath. "I want to give you something your mother never had. Stability, safety, peace." Maria scoffed lightly. "You can't give me peace. You stole it." But then her voice cracked. "Still, maybe you can help me understand her." Richard stepped closer, his tone quiet but resolute. "Then let me tell you everything. Every mistake, every truth, until there's nothing left between us but forgiveness." Maria nodded slowly, not because she was ready to forgive, but because her heart needed the rest of the story. Richard motioned toward the chair across from his desk, and she sat down, still clutching the compass in her trembling hands. "It started with a dream," he began, his gaze distant. "I wanted to build homes that meant something, places where people could start over. But the first man who gave me a chance wasn't building dreams. He was buying silence." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Your mother begged me to walk away, but I was young, greedy, and foolish. When I finally did, those men came after me and her." Maria's stomach twisted. "So you ran?" Richard nodded. "I ran because if they couldn't find me, they wouldn't find her." For a long moment, the only sound in the office was the ticking of a silver clock. "Did she know?" Maria asked quietly. Richard nodded. "She knew enough to be afraid. That's why she stopped answering my letters. She thought keeping distance would protect us both." Maria lowered her head, her hair falling across her face. All those years of unanswered questions. And now the truth felt heavier than the silence ever did. "She waited anyway," she whispered, "every night. She used to look out the window and tell me stories about a man who would come home when the stars aligned." Richard smiled weakly. "She always believed in magic," he said softly, "even when life didn't." Maria's eyes glistened as she looked around his office. The plaques, the awards, the framed properties that symbolized success. "You built all this to forget her, didn't you?" she asked. Richard swallowed hard. "I built it because I thought I owed her that dream. But every house I sold felt empty without her in it." His words hung in the air like confession and curse all at once. "I became a millionaire, but I lost the only home I ever wanted." Maria's breath trembled. "She was your home," she said, "and you were hers." Richard nodded, tears finally breaking through his composure. "And now she lives in you," he whispered. "That's why I couldn't walk away again." He walked to the window, staring out at the city he'd conquered but never truly belonged to. "I bought her old house," he said quietly. Maria blinked. "What?" "The one by the river," he continued. "I didn't know it was hers at first. I just felt drawn to it. Something about that place felt like redemption." He turned back to her, his voice shaking. "It's yours now, Maria. I want you to have it." Her eyes widened, disbelief mixing with anger. "You can't buy forgiveness with deeds and titles," she snapped. He didn't flinch. "I'm not buying anything. I'm returning what should have always been yours." Maria stood, emotion rising in her throat like a wave she couldn't hold back. "You think this makes it right? That giving me a house erases what you did to her?" Richard stepped closer, pain etched into every wrinkle of his face. "No," he said, his voice raw. "But maybe it's a place for both of us to start again. Not as strangers, but as what we should have been from the start." Maria's chest ached, the walls of anger beginning to crack under the weight of his honesty. "You're not my father," she whispered, half to him, half to herself. "Not yet," he replied softly. "But maybe someday you'll let me try." The room fell silent, filled with the sound of two broken hearts learning how to breathe again. The sunrise painted the river gold, and for the first time in years, Maria felt peace instead of pain. They sat side by side. No words at first, just the soft hum of water against the shore and birds waking with the day. Richard turned the compass in his hand, watching it glint between them like a fragile truce. "She used to say the river never judged," he murmured. "It just carried what people dropped into it." Maria smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "Then maybe that's what we're doing," she said, letting the past drift away. He nodded, and for a moment, the silence felt like healing, like something broken finally remembering how to breathe again. They walked through the little house together, each step echoing with ghosts and laughter that only they could hear. The walls were lined with faded photos of families who had lived there before, but somehow it still felt like hers, like her mother had never really left. "I fixed it up a bit," Richard said, his voice low. "Not to erase her, just to keep her alive." Maria ran her fingers along the window frame her mother once painted blue. "She'd love this," she whispered. Richard smiled. "She'd love that you're here." They stood in silence again, and for once, it didn't hurt. It just felt right. Outside, Richard handed her a small wooden box. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice trembling. Maria opened it slowly, revealing a single old photograph. Her mother, young and radiant, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. Behind her stood Richard, his hand protectively on her shoulder, both smiling at the camera. "I thought it was lost," he whispered, "but I found it in one of my old properties last month. It's the day you were born." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "She told me you never wanted to see me." He shook his head, voice breaking. "She lied to protect you. I wanted nothing more." Maria pressed a photo to her heart, her tears falling freely now, no longer from anger but from release. "You can't fix the past," she said softly, "but you could be part of my future, if you don't run again." Richard nodded, his voice barely audible. "I won't. Not this time." The wind brushed through the trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of laughter, her mother's, light and free, as if the earth itself approved. Maria looked toward the river, the compass resting against her chest, and whispered, "We're home, Mama." For the first time, it didn't hurt to say it. It felt like a promise kept. They sat on the porch until the sun climbed high, talking about small things, her favorite books, his failed recipes, the way Elena used to dance in the kitchen to old songs. Every word built a bridge between what was lost and what was being found. "You know," Maria said, smiling through tears, "she would have wanted this. Not the money, not the house. Just this, us talking." Richard looked at her with quiet gratitude. "Then I guess she finally got her wish," he said softly. "She found a way to bring us back together." The compass caught the light again, its needle steady now, no longer lost. As the day faded into orange, Maria stood and looked toward the river one last time. "Do you think she forgave you?" she asked. Richard followed her gaze, the sun reflecting in his weary eyes. "I think she already did," he whispered. "She sent you to me." Maria smiled, tears shining like sunlight. "Then maybe it's my turn." She reached out her hand, and he took it, gently, carefully, as if holding something sacred. The wind stirred the leaves, the compass swung between them, and for the first time in decades, the path ahead was clear. The waitress had found her father, and the compass finally pointed home.